this? Yeah? Okay. Here we go. Several clergy in Russia.
Was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the Kaliningrad.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys? Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the latest edition of Views on the News. This is where we have a panel of opinionated people, the wise and the witty, to give their opinions about the news which we reported yesterday in Global Atheist News, which is all about how religion has impacted humanity over the previous 7 days. That was delivered in as unbiased, as dispassionate a way as possible, but tonight is not like that. Tonight is where we get opinionated and passionate. So let me introduce who our panel is today. We've got Guy Otten from the Manchester area. Welcome, Guy. John Peters. John Peters from up in, I'll say the location again for me.
It's Portland, Oregon, the Pacific Northwest in America.
Thank you. Welcome, John. D.P. Higgs from British Columbia. Welcome, D.P. Higgs, Pirate Higgs. Frank Lovell from Kentucky. Welcome, Frank. And Dr. Ty from Tennessee. Welcome, Ty.
Someone has a name.
Thanks very much for coming. This wouldn't be much of a show without you. So here we go, the first item of the news, which went on relentlessly throughout, despite our attempts to take a holiday over the festive season. And the festive season sort of spilled over. You may remember, if you're a regular viewer, that last week we announced that the Christian Orthodox Christmas was actually last weekend, as they can't agree when Christmas was. And Vladimir Putin announced the ceasefire, you may remember. He said his troops would observe across the front line. Well, we can now report it didn't happen. And this is something that the BBC's reporter from that area said. He said, the pops of outgoing tank fire tell you we're getting close to one of the most active parts of the front line in the eastern Donbass region of Ukraine. Russia's declared 36-hour ceasefire is in name only. They promised there would be one, but we don't see or feel it. The constant bangs of incoming artillery reinforce his point. Then a shell lands 50 meters away from where we're speaking, and he doesn't even flinch. Any of you surprised about that?
No.
Well, disappointed, but not surprised. But Trump has the same relationship to truth that Donald, he who shall not be named, had.
Yeah, Putin, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. Putin and Donald.
Yeah, they're in the same club. Yeah.
Vlad and Donald, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, if the ceasefire had been a precursor to a negotiation which might have led to a just settlement, fair enough, but I saw no prospect of that. No. It's just a bit of a PR job, but that's what it sounded like.
Yeah. Headline grabbing again.
Yeah, well, there was another one I saw on my news feed that pops up that Putin was said he's going to retire this year because he's afraid of a coup. And I was like, well, I mean, if he did retire, he'd be on trial for war crimes, and he spent the rest of his life in prison. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know where they come up with this stuff.
No, there is a concept that all of this grandstanding that Putin's been doing is just because he has a silly last name and is just trying to do whatever he can to seem more macho. And what if we just let him change his name to like Tiger Claw or something, and then everything settles down?
Yeah. He should have a press conference with his shirt off. You know,
Yes, of course, on a
might
stallion.
help.
You're too late. He's done that.
Since the propaganda is so tightly controlled in Russia, that this was probably more for domestic ingestion than anything, and then and now also the Russian Orthodox Church is in bed with Putin. I mean, I've seen pictures of their clergy blessing rifles and armaments and stuff. So, it sounds to me like it was just domestic propaganda and didn't fool anybody, and no one expected it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shame. But there you go.
I see behind you, John Peters, your blue pill, red pill poster.
Yes, I actually took that picture. I cajoled my neighbor into doing that, and so there's a quote underneath it. I don't have it memorized, but it's from Rene Descartes, and it says, if you would be a real seeker after truth, it is necessary that at least once in your life you doubt as far as possible all things. And of course, most of us have taken the red pill, but the very religious are unable to or can't.
Yeah. We would advise everybody to treat headlines in particular with large pinches of salt. Oh, we've got a sad dog. Whose dog is that?
Okay, sorry, that's my dog. Hang on.
Aww.
Poor dogs. They don't like their pack.
You have to let them out once in a while.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to Iran, another wonderful place where 2 men have been hanged for killing a member of the security forces during the nationwide protests. It's very sad because they appealed against their sentences, saying they'd been tortured into making false confessions. Their father, or one of the fathers, pleaded with the judge, saying, I beg, please, I ask you to remove the death penalty from my son's case. And still they hanged them. And this is, of course, only the most recent of hangings that have gone on. There were 2 other men hanged last week. And the rumor is that there's 26 on the death row waiting to be dealt with the death penalty. So, again, I don't imagine any of you are very surprised about that.
Well, I mean, the big issue here is that nobody can be confident that they weren't tortured to extract confessions.
Yeah.
This seems to be sort of a routine, sadly, in the Iranian, inverted commas, justice system.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a note that, like, when we see religious extremism, authoritarianism, tyranny take place in Iran, it sort of engenders, or was it encourages, that's probably the better word, a dangerous mindset that only through tyranny that this level of incongruity or cognitive dissonance or reliance on a absolutely unsubstantiated dogma could exist. But again, look at US, look at the Trump era that we've had. It doesn't take tyranny. It just takes a couple of sycophants and people unwilling to speak up that can cause an entire tide of political, environmental, policy-driven changes that are completely against the interests of people. And it didn't take a guy who's hanging people on the streets to make that happen. It was voters like myself and Frank. It's regular people every day that can let something like that happen. And so when we bring them up in this news, it's good. It's good to see that extreme. But let's not think that that's something that can only happen across the ocean. Yeah. That could happen to us any day. Could happen next year. So let's stay vigilant on that.
Yeah, we here in Europe watched January the 6th a couple of years ago with alarm. We wondered what was going to be the outcome of that. Anyway, the UK has urged the Iranian authorities to end the violence against its own people, and the EU said it was appalled by the use of the death penalty. So there you go. People are speaking. Kenya doesn't often feature in our news, but there's been a death of a young fashion designer and LGBTQ activist, Edwin Chiloba. You should see the pictures of him wearing his design of clothing, and his body, unfortunately, was found dumped in a metal box by the roadside, and a person has been arrested on suspicion of having killed him. And of course, this is in a country, Kenya, where gay sex is still outlawed, and the estimate is that half of LGBTQ Kenyans have been assaulted.
What, you mean assaulted because they are allegedly or suspected to be gays?
Yes.
Exactly.
What, half of the population?
No.
No.
Half of
Of
the
the
LGBT
LGBTQ.
Oh, right, got it. Yeah.
population that identifies as LGBTQ.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's pretty serious jeopardy hanging over your head. One out of every two, based on recent history, can expect bad things to happen to them.
Yeah. Mm. Well, this guy named Chiloba, he wrote on Instagram only last week that he was going to fight for all marginalized people, saying that he himself had been marginalized. He wasn't wrong, was he?
No.
Just wanted to say that there's probably a runoff that comes with that. So if gay people are abused, then it also becomes a point where if you are ever accused of being gay publicly, or at least put yourself in a position where you could be, or vulnerable to such an accusation, that could be just as harmful for you as well. And so that might cause people who would otherwise maybe not commit abuse or sexual abuse against the opposite sex, but to feel encouraged to do so just so they can set up a reputation where they're less inclined for people to believe that they're the kind of people who do that. So imagine being like a straight woman who gets abused or hurt by a guy who's just trying to perpetrate the idea that he's very masculine, just so people know that he's masculine, and using someone as a means to an end in that regard. And if that happens, then that person's child or their family gets injured. Policy, like it trickles down to where everyone gets pulled down by this one lack of tolerance by a group of people. That's the sickness behind it.
They assert only one normality, don't they?
Right. So like
all the victims have to live in the closet, which is no way to live.
Marginalize one group, it affects everybody, really.
And again, we have to remember that this is largely driven by religious ideologies, right?
Right. Oh yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in fact, I've got an example of that coming up next. But Guy, you wanted to come in on this?
No.
I think it was me. So I think this obviously goes back to origins of why people reject homosexuality, and it is in many parts of the world. It is religiously based a lot because of the Bible, the Abrahamic religions. But I think there's a lot of cultural pushback against it too. I mean, in the Asian communities and African communities that are not associated with the Abrahamic tradition. And coming from the role of science, I've actually looked into this, and I finally put it up on a web page. I've got over 25 documented scientific studies and observations that show that homosexuality can be selected for. There's a grandmother effect, there's kin selection, there's a whole bunch of reasons why it occurs every single generation in 1,000 different animal species, let alone humans. And so, I bring that up. It won't push back much against the religious, but it is a tool to use for those who are in the cultural area that feel that homosexuality is a threat to the culture, to society, and is unnatural. And Putin has come out many times against homosexuality, passed laws and stuff. So it's that moral arc of modernity that slowly has been pushing things the right direction in democratic societies. Oftentimes has not reached around the world, and because it's counterintuitive, it's like gays don't reproduce, don't pass the genes, so how can that be selected for? And it involves a little bit of education, and if they're open to that. So, but anyway, I throw my hat in the ring as far as anybody else who may want to know, okay, what is the evidence that homosexuality is actually natural for them and it is being selected for?
Yeah.
Yes.
How annoying is it that Christians are willing to bring up natural selection only when it's at disadvantage to gay people? It's like, oh, wait a second, now I suddenly am a mass revolution. It's like, oh, if you want to put evolution on the table, I have other things I want to bring up then.
Well, it's kinship selection, and it's quite common in other species. Quite a few birds live in a three-way relationship where the female lays the eggs, but she has two males who both help to raise the fledglings.
Right, and the other male, the kind of the recessive male, is usually an uncle. So it's common in pinion jays. It's been studied, and that's one. But also having a gay male, for example, it influences how many brothers are going to be gay and stuff like that. It's really fascinating, and it's absolutely normal for them. It's an advantage to certain families and stuff, and so to marginalize these people, or in many places, unfortunately, they're taken out and killed and hung and strangled and whatever. It's just a terrible remnant of our past that was felt to be. That I mean, look at the problem with the priests in the Catholic Church. It's just your problem is not a gay bar or walking around the street. It's going to a youth group or being in Catholic church. That's where your problem is with being sexually abused.
Mm-hmm. We could do a whole show on this, couldn't we?
Yeah, for sure.
Speaking of Catholic priests, a South Carolina priest who served in the Roman Catholic Diocese of Charleston, I get the American pronunciation right eventually, he's been charged with sex crimes stemming from allegations that he abused an 11-year-old child.
Right.
Jamie Adolfo Gonzalez Farias, known in the church as Father Gonzalez, doesn't that sound cuddly, was arrested in Miami on November the 29th and charged with aggravated sexual abuse of children, coercion of a minor, and transportation of a minor with an intent to engage in criminal sexual activity. He was accused of engaging in the intentional touching, not through the clothing, of the victim's genitalia.
Ooh.
And he left the country, but he's returned. He left to go to Chile, and actually I'm not sure whether he has returned, but that's the state of play at the current moment.
And isn't the diocese claiming ignorance?
Well, they say, the diocese says that it notified the parishioners about the abuse allegations in January 2021. So they claim to have come out about it.
Did they have like an official Twitter, or like how does one find that out? And if that's a channel that news is released on, why isn't that like something that general public atheists or news channels are more privy to? I wonder.
Well, I can let you have the sources, not right now, but I can reveal. In fact, if you look at last night's Global Atheist News broadcast, live stream, no, not live stream, just a stream, you will see the list of the sources. Because what I do when I compile the news is I access a number of different sources for each item in order to get some sort of corroboration. Though I'm not embellishing this or making it up. I'm actually using reputable journalism to provide the information that I put out. Moving on, the Church of England. Now, a report from the Church Commissioners, the body that manages the C of E's £9 billion plus worth of endowment fund, has set up £100 million, committed £100 million to compensate for its historical benefit from international slave trade. How about that? They're not using.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I was gonna say, I don't object to it. I mean, that,
it's a move in
Sounds
the
like
right
a
direction,
reason-
isn't it?
yeah, if you got the money and you wanna use it that way, I'm happy to see that happen.
Yeah. Apparently, the fund originated as a result of Queen Anne's bounty. There was some financial scheme established in 1704 based on the transatlantic slavery trade. And so the Church Commission is trying to address past wrongs, but they're not using the term reparations because the scheme will not compensate individuals who've suffered as a result of this historic trade. It will support projects that are focused on improving opportunities for communities that have been adversely impacted by historic slavery.
Well, I'd like to.
do that? Well, how is
I'd
it?
like-
Do that? Yeah.
Guy,
I'd like to see the monarchy set aside some of their wealth
Yeah,
to put into this.
That'd be
because-
good.
yeah, that'd be good. Sorry,
That's
too
not
soon.
gonna happen.
Also, like, yeah, that's the big question.
If you think of the monarch's wealth and power, it first stems back to conquest,
yes, yes, you do.
and then it's imperialism and slavery, and not paying tax, being above the law, all that kind
Oh
of
yeah,
stuff. So I mean, I'd like to see most of their money, if not all of it, removed.
It's
and it's not like
certainly
they need it anyway. It's not like they're going to Burger King and like, oh dang it, I left my Royal credit card at home. It's like they could get a Big Mac if they wanted one just by walking into one. Like no one's gonna hold them up. Like, do they really need money when you have that much power, notoriety, and authority?
Right.
Like there's a point. China figured it out. Like China's like, I don't like the richest people in China don't need money. So like think about it in like that sense. Why?
Well, King Charles is famous for walking around without any money or credit cards.
Well, that's me too. I don't carry money. Who needs money? You
Oh,
can
well,
tap
you must be a member of
everywhere
the
you
royal
go.
family.
Everywhere you go, you tap your card, and that's it.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is that this isn't the first time that some sort of guilt has been accepted for the slave trade, and some sort of reparation was made. But the first time it was done, guess who was compensated? It was the
slave
owners.
Owners, yeah.
Yes, yeah, because they lost their free labor.
But
of course.
But there's another point here to make, John, about this, and that is that actually, if you look further enough back in history, pretty much everybody in the world is descended from slaves. So it sounds a little bit picky. I mean, I doubt there's anybody in the world that does not have some genetic sort of makeup in their body of, from the time that their forebears were slaves.
Yeah. And truly, everyone is indigenous.
Yeah.
So
to the
there's
globe.
only one
Somewhere,
planet.
yeah.
We're all from the
But that-
Yeah.
But that's what makes slavery so crappy, in that you could take someone who is your close relative and turn them into property over a period of time.
Yeah.
And the fact that we do share a genetic connection doesn't take away the institutionalized disadvantages that are put on one group. So like, it's okay to start a race, but we start a race and have people in like handcuffs and tie their feet together and then let them run 6 laps, the other group ahead, and then be like, okay, we'll untie you, but now everything's even. It's like, hold on, if you want to have a fair race, I'm not saying you got to slow the team that's ahead down. I'm just saying you can't judge this race on the same rankings. We're going to have to make this time-based or figure something out. But this is a sham, and to say otherwise is
that's absolutely right. Yeah.
Well, I like what Dredd has just said, Dredd the pirate, which is that we're not a particular ethnic group, we're not a particular nationality, we're all planetarians.
Yes. Well, you know what I personally hate, and this is for something that's a big point here in British Columbia is the agreements that the government at the time had with the various indigenous tribes. But what I don't like is being cast as a colonialist by virtue of my skin color and my heritage, because I was born here just like anyone else of my time who was born and raised in Canada or in BC. And so it's we have to be careful that the pendulum doesn't swing back the other way too far, right? That myself, of course, I'm totally in favor of lifting the tide so everyone's boat comes up. But it's harder to do if you're seen as the enemy. In some cases,
we're none of us responsible from the crimes of our forebears.
That's exactly right.
And we can't absolve their guilt either. It's not part of our power.
Yeah, there was to take a different analogy, there was a point in time where there weren't any female doctors. And one of the reasons why they didn't want female doctors is because they think they'd be inferior to male doctors, right? And so it took a lot of work on women's end to get to the point where they could become doctors. But the counter argument that's documented, you can look this up, is we were afraid we have to maintain the standard of care that can only be done through the paternal touch, and women are better suited for maternity and stuff like that. It's but it's not until we can get female doctors to exist that the argument can be made that they're bad doctors. You have to first let them first, right?
That's right.
So there's a really unfortunate catch-22 where if you say only women can't be doctors and only men can be doctors, then you have half as many doctors to take care of everybody, which is a problem. But when you let everyone become a doctor, there might be some females that are better than doctors, male doctors, and there might be some that are worse. But now you have twice as many doctors, and these people can learn from each other, and hopefully the standard of medicine can improve for everybody. So really, similar to how it was with being aggressive to gay people, when you come up with these barriers that keep people from having access to things that can benefit society, it hurts all of society. The idea that you can improve people's lives who have been marginalized, whether it's based on skin color or their race or sexuality, these are going to be things that will pay interest much later on in really meaningful ways, regardless of whatever concerns we might have in the present moment. As long as we can just do so equitably, I think it'd be a great move moving forward.
Absolutely. I can see why a doctor might need a brain and a pair of hands. I can't see why he's got to have a cock.
Right?
Okay, moving on then. Cardinal Pell. You must have heard of Cardinal George Pell, who died, sadly. And unfortunately for, I don't know who, not many tears have been shed in Australia, where he first rose to the rank of Archbishop and became eventually the Bishop of Sydney and Melbourne, the Archbishop of Sydney and Melbourne. And when his death occurred, mourners attended a commemorative mass at the church. This is the Catholic Church, of course. And as they went to the funeral, they shuffled past ribbon tributes left for victims and survivors of child sex abuse on the cathedral fence. Because even before he faced charges himself, Cardinal Pell's reputation in Australia was marred by the church's failure to tackle its child sex abuse crisis.
Yeah. I mean, he was actually convicted of sex abuse, but then he appealed and got off on a technicality.
Yes.
So his reputation was permanently, as it were, affected. But
Yes.
in spite of that, he's been treated to an honourable
Yes.
funeral death. So
Yes.
that says something about the Catholic Church, I think.
Yes, indeed. Well, he did become a key person at the Vatican, sort of the Pope's right-hand man who dealt with the finances.
Oh, that's the most important thing to deal with.
Absolutely.
What else are they doing? They're not building anything.
Indeed. So, but when he was charged with sex abuse, they dismissed him, and he came back to Australia and faced the music. And when he got exonerated from the crime, eventually, after the appeal, he went back to Rome, but he wasn't reinstated in his previous role. Okay, so you'll be pleased to know there's a new movie out. It's called Left Behind, comma, Rise of the Antichrist. And the chief actor.
Is it literally called that? Because that's
Yeah.
kind of brilliant. That's kind of brilliant.
I think it's something to do with the what's it called? The rapture, and
Right.
you get left behind if you don't rapture. Anyway,
We're all looking forward to this rapture so that we can have some peace.
yes.
Please come by.
Exactly.
Bring some pizza with
Anyway,
you.
Kevin Sorbo apparently was a Christian actor who's the lead role, and he is, I suppose, he's being interviewed to promote it, and he's reflected on the timeliness of his new film, sharing his belief that Jesus' return might be looming. So there you go. We got news. Jesus is coming back soon.
Well, they've been saying this for 2,000 odd years, haven't they? It's kind of wearing a bit thin now.
2020. Don't give him extra credit.
Well, I think this Left Behind series isn't that the series of books that came out in the 1970s?
Yeah.
And I remember, and then they made movies into them, and yeah, they keep running that tape forwards and backwards. I remember in the 70s when I was in my evangelical days, it was the actually formation of the EU. The 10 countries satisfied the revelation, and the 10 that was supposed to go there. And then unfortunately the EU added more, and Jesus didn't come back before that. But yeah, it's been now with climate change and all this stuff hitting the news for weather problems like in California and everything else. It's just feeding the next generation of oh my gosh, it's all coming true. He's coming back real soon. And, of course, there's over 12 New Testament verses where the Greek says that he's coming back soon, even before some people die. And so, yeah, it's just like, as long as you don't read your Bible, if you take it from the pulpit and don't actually go up and look at it, you can probably do confirmation bias and fit anything in that you want.
So why does the old stories or these same things, these loops, keep happening? And if you think about it, like in science, when it rains and there's like a big bolt of lightning, people are freaking out and they think, oh man, it must be a guy from the sky. Later on, people will be like, you know what? It's only raining in these locations. Let's try to take a close look at it. Later on, the story changes. It's like, actually, we think it's like this thing called electricity, and maybe we can capture it and make powerful things. Now it happens and people don't even bat an eye. They're in their own homes. They have their own lights on and stuff like that. But the God stories tend to be the same ones over and over again. It's like, hey, it's a giant guy in the sky who's angry at you. 100 years later, there's a giant angry guy in the sky that's angry with you. Okay, so maybe he's not in the sky, but he's still angry with you. No, he's still in the sky because he's everywhere. So of course he's in the sky. It drags itself down to the same staid narrative because it can't change. It can't change. And that's why we keep seeing it in practice. So when we see new additions to the lore, or at least commercializations of the lore, And you might be saying, isn't this a thing that came out in the 70s? It's like, yeah, because it's the same mindset. It's the same unevolved set of assumptions about the universe.
Yep.
And that's why it became successful. So if you heard about it once and the storyline doesn't change, that's a demonstration that it's successful and it'll work again in the future. And science doesn't have that, though. You can't really get anyone back on alchemy again. Like the trends tend to like die. And I think that's a good sign, but also an alarming sign for religion.
I can't be president of America because I wasn't born there, but if I could, that one of the first edicts I would make would be a disclaimer on the entrance to all cinemas with a message saying, "You're entering a house of fiction, guys."
Right. Right.
I think another aspect is that the rapture and everything is supposed to occur, and Armageddon that's all tied up with it. They are looking forward to that so that they can be with Jesus and God in heaven. But it also means billions of people are going to die and not make it, and so their friends and family that wouldn't make it. It's really kind of a horrendous look. And remember when Israel was founded after World War II, that was another prophecy that was supposedly going to come about, and things were soon to happen. So the whole I can't remember if it was Hitchens or Harris that used to make a big deal of that these people who are not just wanting or hoping for the rapture, but they want to facilitate it, and it's basically through World War III and nuclear Armageddon that they want this.
Yeah.
You know, I think if you believe in the rapture or you want the rapture, that should disqualify you for any public office, because I don't want anybody in there who wants the world nuked so that you can go up into the clouds.
Well, we were talking about that on the earlier show. It's a Christian Schadenfreude, where if you're up in heaven, you're taking some kind of satisfaction in knowing that all those who didn't believe as you did are suffering forever in hell.
Right.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound very Christian to me.
No.
It sounds very good to me. Read a history book.
That's the irony.
Didn't we have a predicted rapture or end of the world about 3 or 4 months ago, which failed?
You must have missed it, Guy, didn't you? Didn't you see it?
Yeah. I mean, the point is that notwithstanding the reality that these things never happen when they're predicted to happen, these people keep believing it.
Yeah, and sometimes they double down.
Why?
Like there was the one pastor.
The methodologies they're using doesn't change.
Yeah, there was the one pastor there who had convinced everyone it was going to happen on a certain date, and when it didn't happen, he convinced them that it did happen, but on a spiritual plane, not on the real world plane, the physical realm. And they all bought it. They all drank that Kool-Aid.
Well, I got a question for you guys. Was the dinosaur extinction the Velociraptor?
Velociraptor?
Oh, yes. Do it again. This was a good one. Let me do it. Do it again. Guys, going back to the past. Do it again.
The Velociraptor.
Yeah.
Velociraptor.
I like it.
Okay. Well, moving on to England, where a poster of Demi Lovato it's the cover of her latest album, and a poster, and she's depicted wearing a bondage-style outfit, and she's lying on a crucifix-shaped bed with her legs bound in an attitude that resembles Christ on the cross.
Cool.
Okay.
Now, when you add to that the fact that her album is called Holy Vervuk, where the V is in a position where you might expect to find a U.
Right.
Then there are some people who have been outraged by this, and the UK's advertising watchdog has ruled that Polydor Records should remove this offensive item, and it only receives apparently 4 complaints. You have to write in to the authority, the watchdog, and it was removed after 4 days. And Polydor said, the artwork was designed to promote the album, and they don't believe it's offensive.
Well, you know, it's. I don't think it's anywhere in, you know, the laws of England or the laws of Canada or the laws of the U.S. that you have a right not to be offended. Get over it.
Indeed. Well, the people who were offended found that it was likely to be viewed as linking sexuality to the sacred symbol of the crucifix. And this was likely to cause serious offense to Christians.
Oh, goodness.
Well, I mean, you know, I think many gay people would suggest that the symbol of the crucifix is pretty strong erotic material.
Is it? Oh man, is it? I have no idea.
It's bondage. It's bondage.
Oh, okay. Wow. I'm 37 years old and I just heard this for the first time. All right.
I mean, this is the trouble with the image of the crucifix. Near where I used to live, there's a primary school, and right outside, it's a Catholic one, is a full-scale naked body of a man fixed cross. And I think that's obscene. I don't think that should be exposed to small children.
Yeah, for sure.
What would people think if there was a gallows with a body being hung in the same place?
Entirely
like the Church of Judas Iscariot or something, where you know it's him hanging from a tree or something rather than Jesus on a cross.
Anyway, guys, we're coming up to the end of my target time here. I just want to ask what you think of this. Take a look.
And then the Lord said,
I would say,
well, we do have mental health legislation.
sure. I mean, obviously that wasn't all Christians, but I can definitely say that that was probably a group of Christians that lived probably pretty close to each other. And there's always been a thing that a guy I respect who's helped me learn through my academic career said is, you are what you don't expose yourself to. And so, like, if you decide to stay in your circles, you're going to get weird in that circle, especially if your circle gets weird. And that's a weird circle.
Yeah.
Very true. Do you think it applies to us?
So
There you go.
obviously
I'm going to try.
they're having a lot of fun, I think, and you get to work off some calories and speaking in tongues through your body and stuff. And so it's what a lot of churches and the Pentecostals are, entertainment. And it's why not go and enjoy the show? So
It's cheaper than the gym.
I'm going to try some of those moves for my weight loss.
Because it costs too much. That's why that went from 10% of your paycheck.
We know that that Ty rather is a good dancer because he's volunteered to do some before. So all together now, guys, doopy doopy doopy.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I'm going to go out in the garage and try that once we're done here.
If you ever have a question of, is this how I look to other people, you should consider you've got to expose yourself more to different things, different kinds of cultures, different people, different mindsets, different dogmas, or else you'll end up like that. It's guaranteed you'll end up like that if you don't do that. So,
then the men in white
mind.
Next
Rubber band.
Guys, you've been wonderful. Thank you very much for your engagement in this show. Take the rest of the day off, wherever you are.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Hey, bye-bye.
Hang in there.
See you.
Bye.
Several clergy
Was the Pope appealing for peace or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the Kaliningrad.
Yeah, that's a good question.